For big organizations and people in positions of considerable responsibility, crisis communication is a fact of life. Hello, my name is Lauren Sergi, and this is Talk Shop, the place where we get to connect with experts from various industries to discuss communication issues that affect your work and life. You have probably seen at some point a brand, an organization, or an executive having something of a meltdown in the media, thus necessitating crisis communication. Now, crises come in all shapes and forms. Certainly, large social, natural, or health crises can affect us from time to time, but there's also the sort of crisis that can potentially damage the reputation of a brand or an executive. Think along the lines of the Astros response to the baseball scandal, or any sort of number of executive and moguls' responses to scandals that they have been embroiled in. Crisis communication is a fascinating area of the communication profession, and to talk to us today about managing crises, about managing reputations, about handling the human and the social media side of this type of communication is PR and crisis communication expert Molly McPherson. Molly McPherson is a public relations expert extraordinaire, and this woman knows crisis communication. Her years of experience in news and crisis management include working in FEMA's Office of External Affairs during post-Hurricane Katrina efforts and as head of communications for the Cruise Line International Association in Arlington, Virginia. These experiences and others have led her to create PR frameworks for responding to crisis, including dealing with public backlash both online and in the press. She helps organizations emerge from crisis with their reputations intact and helps executives and organizations learn how to manage the murky waters of crisis response in the age of digital. She's a sought-after speaker and hosts the outstanding podcast Confident Communications, which I strongly recommend you check out. Hello, Molly McPherson. Welcome to Talk Shop. You are currently my favorite PR person out there.
Okay, how many do you know then?
Oh, I actually know a few, and you are top of my list, my dear. I found, for everyone watching in terms of context, I found Molly on Twitter, which normally I consider to be like one of the cesspools of humanity, which I just can't get off of. And there was Molly dispensing wonderful PR and media advice, and wittiness abounded. And I reached out and contacted her, and it's like I have a sister down in New York now. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Yes, you're my Canadian sister, but as someone who's based out of New England, whenever I hear of New York, I think of the New York Yankees, Boston. That's okay, you know what I mean? But that Northeast mindset of, the media market is New York. I'm on the East Coast. I'm all about rip from the headlines, PR, and that's what I think resonated with you, which is great. And it's just, I love what I do.
Well, and there's so many headlines to rip from, right? I mean, that's what we come from, living in an information-saturated world. And I am very curious, how many social media accounts are you personally juggling right now?
What an excellent question. No one has ever asked me that question before. But it's so relevant because I speak to a question I get a lot is, well, what should I be on? And it's, I hate Twitter, or I can't stand Facebook. Everybody talks about why it's horrible. But the answer is always this: where do you feel most comfortable? And what you touched on is, where is your voice heard or seen the most? Mm-hmm. So for me, I would say the mantra of me comes out of Twitter the most, because it's very real time. It's very topical. When something happens, I'll go to Twitter. And LinkedIn is my professional face. And then I do have a Facebook for my podcast. And then personally, I have a Facebook, and then Instagram, of course, owned by Facebook. But that's pretty much about it. I don't feel like I need to be anywhere. Oh, and I'm a closet secret TikTok user, so I can watch my kids, but they don't know that.
Oh, I promise I won't tell them. We will not share the link to this. It is parents' parental prerogative right now to let their kids, make sure that their kids don't know that we're creeping on their accounts.
Exactly,
It's,
exactly.
it's very important. So you have a specialty dealing with PR and communication crisis in several different environs. And the first thing that I'd like to lead off with is that as a communication crisis expert yourself, you've seen it all, you've dealt with it all. How would you define, in particular, a social media crisis for executives, for individuals?
Okay, that's a great question. And the reason why it is, it's because it's changed so much just in the past 5 years. So I would say what really kind of got me onto this idea of a social media crisis happened a few years ago. It was Dr. Walter Palmer. He was a dentist from my home state of Minnesota. He killed Cecil the lion, and he posted it on his Facebook page.
Yep.
Because his privacy settings were likely open, it became a worldwide story. Okay, so back then it was all about social media, privacy, who's putting what on social media. So whenever we hear about a social media crisis nowadays, it's reporters digging in to find out what people said 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I think, Lauren, that's changed, that people are now savvy. Even the non-techie people are savvy to bring a phone to someone and say, could you lock down my Facebook, please? So that's not so much what a social media crisis is anymore. How I look at it is that it's a traditional issue or crisis or controversy that's happening with a brand or a person or a business, but it's amplified on social media. And that's how I define a social media crisis. Or your opponents or enemies, whatever it could be, are using social media as a means to attack a brand. So that's another way to look at it.
And I think that's where I've seen most of the, in particular, the social media crises, as you mentioned, as of late. It's people using stuff they've dug up and distributing it via social media in order to attack an individual or a brand. And in particular, with our recent Canadian federal election, that was like every day, constantly. After a while, I started ignoring Twitter completely because it was getting ridiculous.
Right.
So it strikes me that it's not so much people doing dumb things on social media, but people using it as an attack method.
Yes, and a third part of it, and since you touched on Canadian politics, it's what people can uncover, what they can uncover on social media or find, and then they blast it on social media, a la a prime minister who has a number of photos in blackface, right? And that became a story. And it was a time story because it was right before an election. So that's the pattern that I noticed. It's using that social media for an archival point of view, or either as a weapon, but they're using it as a means to represent a brand or to try and bring down a brand or a person.
So if communication crises, because one thing that I'm hearing is that it's not just about social media, of course, like these crises happen all over the place, of course. And if these crises are more broad reaching, what in particular do individuals need to know? I'm thinking of senior leaders, of executives, of people who have a personal presence online or a personal presence even offline that's deeply tied to their brand. What would they need to understand about the use of media overall, or projecting their personal brand image out to the world?
I think my business, my consulting, my advice is kind of moves along with culture and what's happening. What I've really noticed in the last 2 years, but there wasn't a name to it yet, that these brands and leaders were dealing with a crisis, right? But when we define the word crises, most people, I mean, the hack crisis that most people go back to when they think of crisis communication, it's Tylenol, years ago, back in Chicago.
Yeah.
When Johnson & Johnson was dealing with a crisis, they were the case book study of, how you respond to it. So a lot of executives will tune out crisis comms or crisis management because they have this, well, it could never happen to me mentality. The first thing that I do is I try and remove the word as I've changed the lexicon. Don't look at it as a crisis. Look at it as a controversy, because anyone can talk about a controversy. It could be within your building. It could be with your employees. It could be with your product, or it could be something happening externally that's affecting your brand. So it's like this kind of controversy communication. But now in terms of how leaders should look at it is that it's never separate. You know, like when you think of the Tylenol incidents, for instance, there wasn't a CEO's name that anyone could just attach to that crisis, right? But when they think of Boeing, okay, the CEO of Boeing had to step down. The part of the Boeing crisis was attached to the fact that the CEO was a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So what leaders need to understand now is back in the day, they could get behind a closed door. When the media called, they could say, oh, tell them I'll call them back, or have them speak to our spokesperson. All of that has been blown up. It's gone nuclear on this and that. The public, they demand to hear from the leader now. They want to know from the person, either the CEO, the board of directors, they want to hear from the top, especially if something happens. The public wants acknowledgement that they know, one, that something did happen, that they're acknowledging it, and what are you going to do about it? So I think that's what's changed. People who are not comfortable being out there, so to speak, need to be, because the ones who aren't are the ones that get kind of railroaded right out of there because of these crises or controversies.
Right. And, you know, you mentioned the Boeing controversy. Another one that immediately jumps to my mind is just as a case study of how to do it spectacularly badly, is Rob Hayward with BP Oil.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
when he made that idiotic comment, I'd like my life back. Of course, and he was one who had to step down. But it is possible too, though. There are examples of leaders who have managed to increase their reputation and use their own personal aura, if you will, and their personal response to help resolve some of these. One that comes to mind is many years ago, Maple Leaf Foods, a major food processor up in Canada, had a serious listeria outbreak, and several people died from it. It was a big honking problem, and the CEO did a series of announcements straight to the public of unbelievably sincere apologies. I know it's funny. I say unbelievably sincere. Isn't that a contradiction and a half? Incredibly sincere is what I mean. Of incredibly sincere apologies, looking straight at the camera. It was the perfect response, almost. And it was that it was treated with dignity, with serious concern, no trying to gloss over, and it was very, very personal. Are there some other examples that you can think of where an executive got the communication right?
You know,
we always think of the ones that went wrong.
We always think of the ones that went wrong because where we are right now, heading into, now we're into 2020, people are still doing it wrong. And someone had asked me, they said, why didn't you do, and it was someone from Canada, by the way, asked me, why, you know, you did a top 12, you know, crises of the year, you know, PR fails of the year. Why not one of the good PR practices? And the truth is, I couldn't come up with 12 because there really aren't a lot of examples there. People are still learning. But an example where I would say that it does work, and your Maple Leaf example is a really, really good one. And as a complete aside, I saw a viral post about how a little boy in Canada wanted a Maple Leafs cake logo and said they used
the food packers.
Yeah, I know. But here's a brand, like for instance, here's a brand I really never heard of, and now I've heard of it twice in 24 hours because of social media, right?
Yeah.
So an example that I give, and I think it's a pretty good example, and this would probably be, you know, for mostly a U.S. audience right now, but last year, January 2019, we had a Governor Northam. He was from the state of Virginia, and he, very similar to Trudeau, had a blackface problem, right? There was photos that came out of it. The reason why I loved his response is because it was out there, it was a photo. He didn't try and humana it right away. He did a press conference, which is straight out of traditional, you know, 90s media response. But then he sat down at his desk, which I don't love at desks, you know, because that creates another barrier. I like in front of the desk. I tell a lot of executives now, like, do it in your office, but sit at the corner of your desk. It's more relatable that way. But he spoke to what happened. And the first thing that he did is the most critical thing. And I don't care where you or how you do it, the channel that you use. And you mentioned it, that the CEO of Maple Leaf Foods did this, is you acknowledge what happened. The first step has to be an acknowledgement or an apology. You have to recognize, like, yes, there's ownership, because the public is looking for you to acknowledge what you did wrong. If you don't do that, now you're moving yourself in a different lane where the public is just going to bring you down. In other words, they're just going to knock you off the end of the cliff. But this Governor Northam, he admitted, he said, I have no memory of it, which we don't know if that was true or not, but he said,
Depends on how much alcohol was consumed.
Yeah, so he was working with the crisis team undoubtedly, but they were weaving him through of tell as much of the truth as what you know and what you remember, and then acknowledge it, and then talk about, put it into context. He said it happened years ago and it would never happen today. And then the next step is, what are you going to do moving forward? It will never happen again, and so on and so forth. It's that 3-step process, as you would say in Canada. But it's a 3-step process where you have to hit all 3 steps. And if you do, then it's almost like you're given not a full pass, but you're allowed to get through. Crisis management, controversy management, whatever it is, it's messy. It's never not going to be. The mistake you make is that people don't want to be messy at all, so they lie or they cover or they try and outsmart the public. You can't do that. Someone will always be smarter than you, and they'll be online.
So Homer Simpson, stupid like a fox.
Yeah.
Don't try. There are people obsessed about digging up this information, and they will find it. Don't try to hide.
Happens, it's a big dough.
So how do some executives land in the sort of communication hot water that we see? And I'm thinking of situations maybe where there was a brand issue and it became a personal issue, or they just said something extraordinarily dumb on camera. Whether it's via social media, via traditional media, but they get caught saying something stupid. How does this happen? Because these are smart people. You don't reach their level or senior management level in one's career without being smart and savvy and knowing that when cameras are on you or you're in a public environment, that you need to stick to the talking points or not shoot your mouth off, right? How do the individual mix-ups happen?
I would say now, and again, it's changed a lot. I think when a few years ago, people would use social media as that channel to clean up messes. Now, this isn't an example of a CEO or a leader, but it's a universal answer. Kevin Spacey, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
So he was accused by an actor of acting inappropriately when this actor was young. Kevin Spacey thought of, kind of that outsmarting. I'm going to go on Twitter, the social media channel of the moment, and I'm going to explain myself. And if I explain myself, it will work. Well, the mistake that he made is he tied in the fact, he used it as a vehicle to come out as a homosexual while trying to talk his way around, what happened when this actor was 14 years old. We know now he hasn't worked since, and there's been subsequent charges there. I find now that it's not so much that anymore where people are making mistakes on social media. Where I still see the disconnect is that people are saying and doing things behind closed doors still, and they don't think it will get out, and then it will come out. An example, Ken Fisher, he's an investor. He's a very well-known, very wealthy investor. He makes money for people. He's in the business of money, not in the business communications. Mm-hmm. He came out this year. He was in a meeting behind closed doors, talking, felt very comfortable, talked openly, and made remarks, very inappropriate remarks. Sexual nature, of course, degrading to women, the typical hot list. And then a person walks out who attended and gets on Twitter and does a rant on Twitter on video about what he said. A millennial feeling mm-hmm. very comfortable in the space, but the Ken Fisher, he has no idea that this could ever happen. Where someone who's more seasoned now too would understand, like, ooh, if I say something, someone could record it and go out. That's the mistake that I still find that a lot of executives are making, is they don't necessarily do something themselves online because there's still a reluctance there, but they'll say something offline that ends up online.
Right.
How to respond.
So it's kind of this lack of realization that everything is on the record.
Exactly.
everything, and everyone has distribution
Yes,
to share
exactly.
it.
And,
So yeah,
and even more than that, there are people that don't mind. So a lot of these executives, a barrier that they have is they don't feel comfortable sharing everything online. And I'll hear from them say, these millennials, they're just narcissists. They sit on their phones all day. They put their lives online. It's a lot of the definitives, right? Like the
yeah,
millennials, and they do this, and everything is fake news. They assume that people are that there's just a segment of people that are online. But it is true that there are people who are very comfortable sharing things online. Doesn't mean that they're on it all day, but that's the part that broke down. Like, millennials were brought up in a time where they're wired to share on social media their lives, their likes, their dislikes. So they're just as likely to share when someone does something wrong.
hmm
That's the means that they're going to do it. Our executives that are still Gen Xers, baby boomers, they don't get that can happen.
So be aware, big takeaways so far. Be aware that you're always on the record, and be
Yeah.
consistent in your messaging.
Oh, without a doubt. And you want to be consistent. It's not just about creating a statement for print and
Yeah.
creating a statement that I'm going to speak to a reporter. Every statement that you make, think about it. How does it look if they were to put me on camera saying it, if I were on audio, and if it was tweeted? How would it appear? Could someone take it out of context? Could it fit in the course of one tweet? The more social savvy you are, or at least the people who work around you and communicate for you, the better off you'll be. It's just understanding the medium that we're in, that everyone is here. It's not just the millennials who are driving it.
Right. Those are some very, very wise pieces of wisdom. I'm
Uh-huh.
just full of tautologies today. One thing that I'd like to pivot to a little bit is getting the human touch into your communication as a leader or as an executive. And this is, again, on or off social media, because I don't believe that social media is the end all and be all method of demonstrating your authenticity. What is it that makes an executive or a leader appear human and appear authentic? Because that is so important for gaining people's trust. But I think that there is a line that you have to dance between showing your human side and maybe showing too much or going too far or becoming saccharine. How,
Right.
how can we deal with this?
And again, just like everything else I've mentioned, everything has changed. It's dynamic, right?
Yeah.
It never stays. It's constantly moving. I used to use the word authenticity all the time. It just rolled off the tongue, like, be more authentic, be more authentic. I think as a word now, it's a charged word. When people hear authentic, they hear, oh, you just want me on video. You want me on Facebook Live.
Yeah.
Me. And
Here's
authentic,
my dog. I'm
exactly.
authentic.
Authentic, I now believe, feels fake. It's
Yeah.
like a fake. It's like what you want to project to people, what my authenticity is.
It's an
And
Instagram filter.
I love that. It's a filter. It's a filter. And we're not in a no filter environment anymore, but we want to be. So the word that I've shifted from, instead of authenticity, is just being genuine. Okay. And if you're genuine, that means you're being yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I love executives who are themselves. For instance, if I'm speaking with an engineer, someone who didn't spend a whit of time dealing with communications, and they kind of stumble through something, or I don't know how I'm going to say that. That's who they are. They're being genuine. And people like that. Because if you're genuine, you're being truthful because you're being yourself.
Mm-hmm.
People respond to people being themselves. So as a tip that I give when it comes to executives and how you can use it, go to a place where you feel comfortable, where you feel the most comfortable. Video is good. Very few people feel comfortable on video, of course, but it is the means that messages can get out there the quickest, and where people can download it and take that information and disseminate it quickly. But what genuine means is find your true north as an executive. So whatever your passion is. So maybe you're an executive that works in automotive, but you're passionate about the environment. Maybe you're an executive who works in hospitality, but you're passionate about kids and children's causes. Whatever it is, tap into who you are And people will respond to that true north of you. So even if it's not pretty or it's messy, if it's you, it will work. So in the good times, people will see it. It will just like jump off the screen. But in the bad times, it's your genuineness that is going to protect you because it's who you are. And if it's your mission, your true north of who you are, people can't accuse you of being false or hiding because it's me.
Mm-hmm.
Or
It,
you.
it's yeah. It kind of lets people. It sounds like it lets people say, okay, they are the face of this brand, but they're also this.
Yes,
They can start to they can create a human behind the brand.
yes, yes. And an easy way to do it, here's an easy way where you don't have to get deep on it. If you are a leader who loves a sports team, I mean, that's so easy, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm a huge Red Sox fan, go Red Sox. And, that just dehumanizes you, right? But without hitting someone over the head. If you love dogs, if you love to run, if you love a TV show, it doesn't matter. It's just show us who you are. And the more that we see just the essence of you, the better off you're going to be, and people will respond to it.
And those sorts of things aren't terribly sensitive personal information. You don't need to reveal a lot that, no one wouldn't, that would bother anyone or make them say, oh, I didn't realize you were into that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not sensitive. One that I think of is is an author. For a while, he was posting his running times. And it was just a simple post of, here's a picture and ran this long in this much time today. Bloop. That was it.
Yes.
And it was, oh, you do things other than write books.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah. But, not revealing details of his life or posting pictures of his kids or things like that.
Right. And the 2.0 of that could be, okay, now you're posting your time. So maybe the next thing that you do is, I was on a run today and I was inspired by this family that I saw. And it triggered this thought that I should write a book about so on and so forth. So now you're creating a story because everyone loves a story, from the time you're a child all the way through, whether it's a news story, a fable, whatever it is. Everyone has one and people can relate to stories. So as much as you can bring in whatever these factoids about you to show your genuineness and turn it into a story as why it's a part of you, then it works. Like just quickly, like my story, when I worked for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, it was at a time after Hurricane Katrina when everyone hated this agency because they were the agency that bungled the response of Hurricane Katrina and the flooding, the devastating flooding in New Orleans. Now, they were certainly a part of the problem, but there were lots of people that were a part of the problem. But for my job working in public affairs, trying to get a good story for us, the traditional press wouldn't give it to us. They're like, nope, you're dead to us. You're tainted to us. But I said, how can we talk about what we really do? And the idea was, well, why don't we just become our own broadcaster and bypass traditional press and put our own videos out there and put it online. And it was like the start of the social media program. And really all it was tapping into the genuine mission of FEMA, which was helping people. And so the next time a disaster happened, I flew out there, started filming us helping people. It softens who you are. It softens that hard edge of the bad news story and lets people in on this real story of what you do. Any executive or any business owner or entrepreneur can do the same.
That's a fantastic bit of applicable advice. Actually, I'd say to wrap this up on, you know what you're about in this field. Molly knows what she is about in here. And you've got a few really exciting projects on the go, as well as an outstanding podcast on communications issues with a fairly broad look at communications issues that affect our leaders and our businesses. Can you tell us a little bit of what you've got on the go right now?
2020 is a year, again, we're morphing, always changing, very dynamic business. I'm now moving towards a place where I feel I bring the most value. Okay. And where I see it is in a room when I'm speaking to people, or when I'm giving workshops. So 2020 is all about me speaking and being in front of an audience, because that's where I get my passion. That's where my genuine true north is I love teaching. I love helping people. And when I can see them do it as opposed to on a piece of paper. So I do have clients that work with me on a retainer basis for a crisis, which happens a lot. But I'm in the process of publishing a book, Indestructible Leader. And, it's how to survive when everyone wants to bring you down in this time of controversy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm working on this book. I'm finishing. It'll be published this year soon. And I'm giving a lot of talks and a lot of workshops around this idea of what you and I were just talking about. How can you be indestructible, not be canceled out in the day of the cancel culture? And the podcast supports it, because it is communication tips in the sense of how do you become indestructible in this age. So it's for any leader, business owner, anyone working in business, anyone that's interested in how to be a better communicator in terms of navigating the modern age, so to speak. And I also do have courses on my website. So it's like I'm bringing some of my workshops online. So I have one, Communicate with Power in Less than an Hour, some of the tips to help you be more genuine as a leader, but also one called Calm the Critics, which if you do have, a lot of my clients are dealing with a segment of activists or micro activists, or at least stakeholders that are no longer happy with the business that you're providing or the service or the leadership. So I've created a playbook to help get you through that incident or that controversy that you're dealing with. And they're both on my website, which is mollymcpherson.com.
Wonderful. And I will link up to the website, of course, in the notes down below. And once that book is out, Molly, I'm having you back. We are going to talk about indestructible leadership for sure.
Oh,
I love holding up books, talking about them with all of the flags. So we will definitely be having you back on the show to discuss that as soon as it's out. And yes, please do visit Molly at mollymcpherson.com. She has so much on her website. Her podcast is really good. Make sure you check it out. And of course, if you want to be sure that you continue getting the communication goodness that we have going on right here, hearing from more experts like Molly, more advice that you can apply to your own communication at work and in life, head over to laurensergi.com and sign up in the pop-up to make sure that you don't miss our next episode of Talk Shop. Molly, thank you so much for coming. This was heaps of fun. I can't wait to have you back again. And to everyone else out there, speak well, be consistent. You are always on record. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.